So welcome to our talk tonight. Why what you believe about yourself is not true. I'm Michael Dalton. I've been practicing bioenergy healing for over 30 years. And our talk tonight is about stripping away some ideas and some concepts, maybe some conditioning and programming, and bringing us back to more that true self. The work of bioenergy is always, in essence, is always about returning people back to their light, back to their health and their well-being. As a healer, one of the interesting things that I would say as a healer is that nobody is healing anybody else, right? That healing is the body's natural state. Healing is simply what the body does when we get out of the way. And so really what a healer is doing for someone else is really helping them get out of their own way. Years of meditation and practice, whenever I've asked like Great Spirit for divine message, and I always get the same message, and the message is get out of the way. And I always think, like, is there anybody else I can ask? I'm looking for something else here. But the answer is always the same: get out of the way. And we come to this kind of like statement, why what you believe about yourself is not true. It's like one of the, like, from doing like not just like individual practice, but group work and group sessions in multiple countries with multiple people over multiple years. I often share in bioenergy, like in our trainings, I always like break down the trainings really down to kind of one nugget, which is that people have this personal lie. And it's a personal lie that they tell themselves. And we don't necessarily think of it as a personal lie, but that's actually what it is. It's a personal lie that we tell ourselves. And everybody has the same personal lie in one way or another, whether it's covered up or whatever. But that personal lie is that you're not good enough. And after training thousands of people and working with tens of thousands of people, it doesn't matter how much you cover up, it doesn't matter what your practice or process is, everything comes back to that personal lie. That's what we're stripping away. That's what we're healing, renewing, replenishing, fixing, clearing. That's what we're really working with, is to get that personal lie and to heal it. And a couple of things with that, it's like flushing it out, right? We have to flush out, well, where did that come from? And that personal lie that you're not good enough or that you're not enough, that will continue on through your whole life, like literally as a wound from childhood, and that will play out in your own life. And I often share it with people, when you, like, that relates then to your self-worth, right? Because when you don't feel good enough, your self-worth, your value in yourself goes down. And everything from the relationships that you're in, to the jobs you're in, to the earnings that you make, everything is a reflection of that value that you have of yourself. And so I always think like healing and training is always about us restoring and replenishing that first relationship, which is the relationship to the self, to come back into right relationship with the self. In bioenergy, we say there's three relationships: relationship with the self, relationship with nature, and relationship with each other. And the first relationship is restoring that relationship to the self, restoring that imbalance where we've gone away from truth. We've literally being pulled away or extracted from truth. And how that happens is through conditioning and programming. We take on board sometimes what other people say about us. And it starts from when we're very young, right? From our parents, to the schooling, to teachers, to church, to governments, to friends, to siblings, right? There's no shortage of people that want to tell us how good or how bad we are, how good we're doing it, how wrong we're doing it. I mean, you could have a parent now who's like quite elderly and they're still probably telling you what to do, right? Like you could have an older parent who's pretty up there in the years and they're still telling you what to do, right? It doesn't stop because people get older. People love to tell other people what to do. The only problem is it's like whether we take that on board or not, because at the very least, someone else's perception of us is distorted, right? Like it really is based on how can someone else reflect the true you back to you without filtering it through their own perceptions, through their own distortions. So it's like the biggest challenge that we have is really believing what other people think about us. And what's so weird is we'll believe what other people think about us more than what we believe about ourselves, right? Like, you know, even if 20 people tell you something lovely about yourself and one person says something bad about you, you will focus in on what that one person says. Why? Because there's a wound in there. There's a wound that says, you know, they might be right. They must be right. They're speaking to that part of yourself that isn't healed. You know, and so we're sometimes we're listening for the wounds, right? We're not listening for confirmation of all the good things in our life. We're really we listen to the wounds. When the wound comes up, we get triggered and we go straight there, and we forget about the 19 good things we hear, and we focus in on that one thing that we hear that activates the wound, not to punish ourselves, but to expose the wound and to try to bring it into consciousness, you know. So I always think, like, you know, the process of healing is to help people flush out their wounds, right? Like that's the process of healing. It's to flush out the wounds. It's like sometimes we become so like protective of our wounds, and even in today's society, we have to be careful not to offend everybody, right? People are so easily offended at everything, right? And so we're kind of like cultivate ourselves in a way where we're trying not to upset other people, trying to give people what they want, and we're sometimes coming out of our own alignment and not listening to what it is that we want. And there's all these things that we're sometimes juggling. But the process of flushing out our wounds is that, you know, when we feel uncomfortable, when we get triggered, then there's a wound there, right? Like, you know, as much as people don't want to be triggered and you don't want people upsetting you, it's like, it's not about people not upsetting you. It's about, if something is upsetting you, then that's calling for healing. That's the part of you that needs to be healed. You can't kind of, the bizarre thing in our society right now is like trying to get people not to upset other people, right? Well, maybe it's okay that people are upset and they need to release that upset. That's the wound that needs to be healed, not for people not to activate your wound, but for you to release your wound so that you're not activated, right? Like, wouldn't that make more sense? So at least in that way of like working with thousands of people over 30 years, you know, healing is very much about helping people release their wounds, right? So that when your wounds are released, you can be around people and not feel like, oh, they can't say, people are not walking on eggshells. They're not abiding saying stuff as a way of upsetting you. It's like, that's what healing is, you know. And it's kind of like, you know, just like when someone heals back pain, when your back pain is healed, you're not being careful about lifting something or moving something, right? Like if your back pain is healed properly, you're not having to adjust your life so as not to injure or hurt yourself. Like if it's working, if your back is working well, it's working well, right? Like if your immune system is working well, it's working well. The problem is that sometimes things are not working well and we're adjusting our life to it, right? So when people are not healing, we're adjusting our lives to them rather than getting the people to heal, right? Rather than getting people to heal their wounds, now we're adjusting how we speak, how we communicate, how we interact with people so that people don't feel triggered. And really, we have to come back and we have to we have to purge and clear those wounds. And I find that a lot of wounds come back to this one personal lie. And this is why I say, like, why what you believe about yourself is not true. And even though you may not think that what you believe about yourself is that you're not good enough, that's the underlying subconscious pattern that comes up for like almost every single person when you dig deep enough. When you strip everything away and you come back to the core wound that underlies all other wounds, it's this feeling of not being enough. And like I said, whether that comes from family, from parents, from siblings, you know, regardless of where it comes from, the most beautiful thing happens, I feel, in healing. And that beautiful thing is what I would always call in bioenergy simplicity. That when you strip everything out of the way, when you get everything out of the way and you just come back to you and your relationship with yourself and you breathe, the simplicity of that connection is love. It's love. The simplicity of your true connection, of you coming into alignment, is undistorted light. You're just pure light. You're just pure, vibrant, full fractal light consciousness light. That is your source code. That is the simplicity. When you remove everything out of the way, that is the simplicity of what you are. You're just pure love, just pure unconditional love. There's nothing to argue with. It's purely vibrational. It's purely experiential. It's just simply who you are. It's not something you give. It's not something you receive. It's not something you graduate in. It's not even something you earn. It's just simply what you are when you remove all the baggage. When you remove all the conditioning and all the programming and all the wounding and all the pain and all the suffering and all the bullshit that we tell ourselves, when you take everything out of the way, the only thing that's left is light, is love, is pure presence, is pure connection to all that is, to source code. You know, and that's what we are, you know, and there's a simplicity about it. It's not complicated. It's really simple. We're full fractal light beings. And the things that we tell ourselves are often not even what we're telling ourselves. It's stuff that we've heard and that we picked up, which is from when we're very young. We're always listening, right? We're always listening, whether you realize it or not. You know, it's why young kids will go around and repeat what their parents say. You know, young kids will go around and they'll be like, they'll just repeat what their parents say. And even though the parents are not often aware that they're saying those things, you know, it's like when a young kid curses for the first time and the parent is like, where did that come from? And then they realize, oh, that they might be doing that, and the kid is copying, right? So they model, and that's what we do. We model. So we learn through visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, right? So visual, auditory, kinesthetic. We learn through those three modes. And then the fourth way that we learn is through experiential. And so we get imprinted upon, primarily our parents are going to be the biggest influence, you know, and your parents doing the best that they can. Sometimes life is friggin' hard. Sometimes life is challenging. And you know, people aren't always in their best form or in their best place. And sometimes when things are said, those things are imprinted upon kids. And at one point, not that long ago, you were a kid, you were a child, not a goat, but you were a kid. And you may as well laugh now. The jokes don't get any better. But in terms of you take on board though that imprinting and the things that other people have said to you over time, you keep saying those things to yourself. And you start speaking to yourself in the way that your mother and your father spoke to you. So your inner voice becomes your mother or your father, or even your grandmother or your grandfather. So much so that even how you speak to yourself is not even you speaking to yourself, right? It's the same. How your mother spoke to her is not even her speaking to her. How your mother speaks to you is not even, it's not even a true reflection of what is. It's the ancestry being passed down, the programming and the conditioning being passed down, and so much of it happening unconsciously. So much of what we say, so much of what we speak, so much of what we pass on is all happening unconsciously. So much so that the things that we say to ourselves are often even unconscious. We're not even conscious of how we're speaking to ourselves. And so I always say no one beats us up more than we do ourselves. No one, like if you spoke to your friends the way you speak to yourself, you wouldn't have any friends, right? Nobody would put up with it, right? Like, because people would, if you spoke to your friend in a mean way or an unkind way, they're going to call you out on it. They're not going to accept that shit. They're going to call you out, right? But when you're doing it to yourself, it goes unnoticed. You can berate yourself, you can put yourself down, and it goes unnoticed, right? Because it's the same voice that you grew up with, right? So it's the parental imprinting that now you're speaking to yourself, and it goes unnoticed. And so one of the beautiful things about like what I want to share tonight is that in the simplicity, when everything is stripped away, not that you have to put in new programs and new conditioning and new positive thoughts and convince yourself that you're good enough and you're wonderful and achieve things for, that's just filling yourself up with more programming and conditioning. My point being that when we strip everything away, like what I've noticed from working with thousands and thousands of people in healing sessions, what I notice, when you clear the blocks out of the way, when you get people out of their own way, what remains? Are you ready? Love alone remains. And that's it. Love alone remains. When you strip everything away, love alone remains. No defense mechanisms, no protectiveness, no pain and suffering, no guilt or shame or fear or anger. When you strip everything away, when you clear out the chakras, when you purge your wounds, when you release the shadows, when you do the shadow work and you release your wounds, when you work through your chakras and you clear out the physical and emotional and mental blocks, and you clear things out, and you do the work on yourself, and you earn it, right? Like you have to earn it. You do the work and you earn your healing. When you strip everything out of the way, you don't have to put anything in. Love alone remains. And it can never be removed. It can never be fully stripped away, because it is you. It is fundamental essence of the universe. It is literally the composition of what we are made of. We are made of love. We are made from love. And so healing is not something as abstract as people think it is. Healing is really a return to love. Healing is stripping away the falsehoods and coming back into pure integrity, into pure light, into in Lemurian is called Nimarana, undistorted light, where we return back to our fractal energy. We return back to completeness, right? And so in that completeness, in that atonement, in that alignment, in bioenergy, we call that the vertical flow of energy. So as we return back into relationship with the self, into our alignment, then that connects us with nature, with the cosmos and the sun, and the earth, Mother Gaia. So now, as we come into alignment within our heart, most people think of the heart as like, giving and receiving, but think of it more as like almost like a vertical energy, right? Like it connects us to the universe rather than I'm giving love and receiving love. It is love, and it's your connection to the universe. It's infinite, it's unbounded, it's unrestricted. It is your like, it's your internet is the best way. It's what connects you to all things at all times. It's your full connection, your full fractal. It's your open heart chakra. And so then that energy that opens the heart, that connects us to the cosmos, to Mother Gaia, to nature, that energy is always looking to guide us with one purpose, to guide us into integrity, to guide us into alignment. And then when we come out of alignment, that energy is always looking to get us back on course. It's always looking to guide us back into alignment, like a pendulum, right? It's always looking to bring us back into alignment. And so sometimes we might go off course, we might take a wrong direction. I was doing a class this morning, we were talking about mistakes. And, there's a theory that, there are no mistakes, we learn from everything. Well, I was mentioned on the class, I don't know about that. I think we maybe do make mistakes. I think we all have. I know I have. And I don't think it's a problem. I don't think it's bad that we make mistakes. I think it's okay to admit that we make mistakes. It's just like, do we learn from it? Do we grow from it? Or do we deny it? Like when we say, oh, you don't make mistakes. Well, I don't know that that's true either, right? Like maybe we do make mistakes, and maybe it's okay that we do because we're human, right? And I think like coming into this, like when everything gets away and we return to love, like that return to love is not based on whether we make mistakes or not. It's not based on whether we achieve something or not. It's not based on whether we do something or we don't do something. It's not based on whether someone else approves us or not. It simply is. It's like it's an ism, So it's just like the weather is just the weather. It doesn't care what you think about it, right? Like the weather doesn't change because you appreciate it or you dislike it. It's just the weather, right? You're who you are. You just simply you are all of it, right? Your mistakes, and you're the beauty. You're all the things, the magic, the wonder, the healing, the sick. You're all of the things, right? And it's this deeper connection to our alignment to nature that we become aware that we're not one thing, but we're all the things. We're we're good, we're bad, we're right, we're wrong, we're up, we're down, we're in, we're out. We're all of the things, right? And that life is a reflection of our consciousness back to us. And so when people are giving us ideas about who we are or what we are, at the very least is coming from a distorted perception of how they perceive us, right? So the practice I've often tried to share with people is like, it's not so much that you can tell people who they are. Like, I can tell you, hey, you're a beautiful, powerful, spiritual being, full fractal, light consciousness, light being. And you're like, oh, Michael, that sounds wonderful. Thank you very much. And that's fabulous. But there's no integration in that. Like I can tell you that, but that doesn't mean that you get that or understand that. It's like, let me show you here. Look. I can take this piece of paper and I don't know if you can read that, it might be backwards, but it says water, and I can give you this. I can say, here's some water for you. Who's thirsty? Have some water, right? But this, even though it says water, it's just a word. It doesn't translate to what that is, right? Like it's what water is. I actually have some water here. Hold on. Ah, water. Lovely. But this does not translate to me drinking this, right? Like they're different. And so at the very least, words can help describe things and can imprint things and give impressions. But the experience of who we are has to be experienced in order to release the conditioning and programming. Because otherwise, you start thinking, like with enough conditioning and programming, you start thinking that this is water, right? You think like, hey, this is water. Everything tells me that this is water. But that's not water. But sometimes we don't know what we don't know. So then we start believing the things that we're told about ourselves. We start believing them. Where everything from like one of the I think one of the things that is like an injustice to the human being is that we're told that we're just physical and a chemical system, and that your conditions are genetic and there's nothing you can do about them. And I think that's an injustice to the human being, because we're so much more than our genetics. We're so much more than the conditioning and program. We're so much more than what has been passed down to us. And when we're told, look, this condition is genetic and, you know, it needs to be treated with pharmaceuticals, then the process there is that we're giving our power away. We're giving our power up. And we start like buying into this idea, well, okay, pharmaceuticals are not going to heal me, but I need to take them in order to treat this genetic condition, you know. And in there's a wonderful doctor, Dr. Bruce Lipton, and he talks about how genetic conditions account for less than 1% of conditions. So it, like in so many ways, these things get taken out of proportion. And Greg Brading's another really great one. And they both like really talk about the power of the human being. When we come into our alignment and we start using the power of our mind, how we can activate health and well-being back into our bodies. And I'm a big believer in that, because I think that when we get people on board, like you've got to get your mind on board with your own healing. Because if your mind isn't on board with your healing, just like if you maintain this underlying belief that you're not good enough, it's going to sabotage your healing. It's going to sabotage your relationships. It's going to sabotage your finances. You could get a great new job and then lose it. You could find the most wonderful person, go into a relationship, and then get divorced, right? Sometimes it has less to do with the other person, or has less to do with what's going on outside of us, even though we think all of these things are happening outside of us. But so much of what's happening is a reflection of our own lack of self-love for ourselves. It's a reflection of our own wounding that hasn't been healed, that hasn't been restored, that hasn't been brought back into right relationship. And so the return to healing is about giving up that personal lie, giving up that wound, you know, and returning not to the concept or the idea that you're enough, because just like the piece of paper, you know, and let me just put a note on this here. Can you read that? Is it backwards? I'm not sure if it's backwards. I'll turn it upside down. Does that make it easier? No. But it basically says you are enough. But like this piece of paper doesn't make you enough, right? Like you saying the words doesn't make you enough. This is where we got to get in, and we got to uproot that wounding and release it and heal it. And we have to our journey, our healing journey of this life is returning back to who we are. It's remembering, an awakening and a remembering. And there's a beautiful concept really too, that we're alive at a time where people are waking up. We're alive at a time where people are remembering who they are. And we're coming back into remembrance of who we are and what we are. And like I said, it's not like what I'm saying to you, what I believe you are. It's I really think the only way we can really like teach like spirituality in any form is not by telling people something, but by stripping away what we're not, right? Like you can't teach truth, but you can strip away what it's not. Does that make sense? So like you can teach by removing the things out of the way. And that comes back to what I was saying at the beginning, which is all the lessons that have been channeling through me for 30 years, they're all about getting out of the way, right? Like, how do you help someone return to their full health and well-being? By taking the blocks out of their energy system, by taking the blocks out of the way, by taking the beliefs and the conditioning and the programming out of the way, by taking the wounding and the aches and the pains and the suffering out of the way. You're not putting anything into the person. You're just simply taking everything out of the way of them being in alignment with their true self. And so that was kind of really the basis for my talk tonight, of why I really think like what people believe about themselves is not true. Because I think that in so many ways, and we can go in so many different directions with this conversation, but I think in so many ways that what other people think about us is none of our business. Wayne Dyer said it really well. He said, what other people think of you is none of your business. And I really like that, right? Like, what other people think of you is none of your business. But one of the things that I teach in bioenergy, and I teach it because it's about helping people strip away the illusions and the falsehoods. And one of the things I teach is that is to take nothing personally. To take nothing personally. But unfortunately, what do? People take everything personally. We're so easily offended unless we're not. But generally, people take everything personally unless they don't. But generally, people do, right? Like, people take everything personally, so easily offended. Oh, such and such said. Well, so what? Let people say whatever they want, right? It doesn't touch your light. But what we've done is, because we take everything on board and we take it personally, we've gone into distorted light. Now what happened is, because you believe what other people say about you, and if what other people say about you is distorted, at the very least it's distorted because it's coming through the filters of their perception, right? Like, no one can reflect truth back to you. Truth is truth. Like, it's not a reflection, a mirror. Like, I'm trying to reflect things here to you on paper, and even that is not a true image of what I wrote down. It's like backwards or upside down or something. But like, it's a reflection, but it's not the thing itself, right? And even in the summary of I say, like, you are enough, but that's not the essence of who you are. Just as the word water is not the water itself. The word water doesn't touch what water actually is. You could be in a desert with lots of piece of paper to say water on it, but you're going to die, right? Like, you're going to die of thirst. It's much better to have actual water than the idea of water, than the concept of water. And so sometimes people are going for years going through healing processes, and they're going through the concept of healing without actually getting the healing, right? They're in the idea of healing without actually doing the healing, right? You have to step into the healing, right? You have to drink the water. You have to drink the essence of it. You have to earn it. You have to breathe into it. You have to do the work on yourself. It's not enough that, oh, time will heal. I don't know that that's true. I mean, ask someone with back pain for 30 years if time heals, right? Ask someone with emotional trauma if time heals, right? It heals if you do the work on yourself. It doesn't heal if you don't do anything, right? Like, time heals as you're doing the work on yourself. But nothing heals if you don't do nothing, right? The definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over and expect a different result, right? That's the definition of insanity. So we have to interrupt the programs. We have to interrupt the patterns. And one of the patterns that I like to interrupt is, bringing back to people like this remembrance that what other people think of you is none of your business, that we commit too much to what other people think of us. I would even say what you think of you is none of your business, right? Why would you believe? Don't even believe what you think about yourself, because even what you think about yourself is full of conditioning and programming, right? It's more fucking bullshit. Sorry, but like, pardon my French, I'm a little bit Irish, actually a lot Irish, but when we come back to, like, if we reach this point where we say, okay, I'm not going to believe what other people say about me, but I'm also not going to believe what I say about me, then the only place left is experience. The only place left to go is experience, to experience who you are, to feel who you are, to intuit who you are, to connect who you are. When we stop going outside, then we got to start going inside, right? And as we start to go inside and we start to connect, then you start to connect with your breathing is one of the best ways. Your breathing is a great way to slow down, to come into presence, right? We can slow the world down with our breathing, right? We can stop the world with a kiss, right? How do you stop time? Kiss someone. I mean, not random people. They might be offended. But we slow down time with breathing, and I think we pause time, when we kiss, in those moments of magic where we just slow down and we pause, right? And so in that space where we pause, healing is right there for us to be received. And the gift of working with a healer, working with someone, is the healer's like a tuning fork. They tune you into places that you're not able to go to by yourself. It's not that you can't go, but it's just like sometimes it's really hard to get to those places inside yourself, because there's so much distortion in the way. And so the healer's like a tuning fork, bringing you into the frequencies so that you get familiar with them, so that you get familiar with what that feels like to feel undistorted. What does that feel like? Like, one of the feelings people often say to me is, Michael, I feel so light and so free after the healing. I don't know what you did, but I feel so light and so free. And so as people start to feel that, that's a tuning fork. They're starting to feel that's what it feels like without all of the garbage, without all the conditioning and programming. You feel light and you feel free. And you're tuning people into that frequency. And like I said, it's not that people can't get there by themselves, but generally people won't, because part of what helps us is that, like, as we heal as community, as we resonate together, like, as we learn and grow from each other, it's kind of like, when someone does the work on themselves, it's easier for them to help someone else do the work on themselves, and and so forth. But it's like when you're doing the work initially, it's a lot harder to find those places inside yourself that you need to heal. And sometimes the what I really love, like specifically with group work, is that when people come together in a healing group, that magic, absolute magic happens that can't happen with a person by themselves. There's something beautiful and magical that happens when people come together into a group. There's there's a presence that takes place. There's an authenticness that comes in. There's an energy that moves through the room, that moves through people, that people connect with. And to me, that's the beauty of when we slow down and we give ourselves permission to have time for our healing. It's like, I don't know, I've been promoting healing for the last 30 years, so it's not a new concept or a new idea for me. But I sometimes think like people will spend more money on their car than they do on their own healing. People spend more money on their phone than they will on their own health and well-being. And it's kind of like, when people get sick, then they're like, I'll do anything to get better. But then when people are better, they just ignore their health. So, I think that sometimes like when one has the experience of they see like, look, people can actually keep themselves healthy. We don't actually even need to get sick. We can maintain really good levels of health. Not only can we maintain good levels of health, we can reach higher levels of consciousness and awareness by investing some time and energy into it. And I think that it takes a lot less energy to invest in your health and your consciousness when you're healthy and open than when you're sick and closed. So it's like, do you fix your car after it breaks down, or do you maintain your car before it breaks down? And so that's all. I think that's what I've just tried to do, is just kind of help people understand the value. And that's really what it is, the value of taking care of yourself when you're healthy, right? Not waiting till you're sick, not waiting till you're ill. It's a lot harder to turn someone's health around when they're ill and they're sick than when they're healthy. When you're healthy, it's so much easier to keep yourself healthy. And you can identify, like energetically in the energy field, you can identify emotional and mental blocks in the energy field long before they become illness and sickness in the body. There's nobody wakes up one day and they're ill and they're sick. You don't wake up one day and you're ill. There's messages coming to you over and over and over, letting you know that you're out of alignment. There's messages coming to you, like you could call them red flags. There's red flags coming up and saying, hey, you shouldn't be doing this. Hey, this is going against what you enjoy. This is going against your truth. This is not your value. There's messages that people get before they ever get sick. And you have to ignore those messages enough to actually become sick. And so by the time people get sick, they generally have been ignoring their intuition. They generally have been disconnected from themselves and from nature, and sometimes even from each other, right? And I used to find, like, I was treating, when I first got into bioenergy, I was treating people with heart attacks. And there was a few people that said to me that they knew that they were going to have a heart attack. Well, I found that really interesting. I was like, well, how did you know you were going to have a heart attack? And they said, well, people told me I was going to have one. And I said, well, what people told you? And they said, well, people recognized that I wasn't slowing down. I was just working all the time. I wasn't like resting. And they said to me, if you don't slow down, you're going to have a heart attack, And it's almost like other people recognize it, but the person themselves didn't recognize it until they had the heart attack. And I sometimes think, like, sometimes when people get sick, when you get a cold, maybe you're burning the candle at both ends. Maybe you're overdoing it. Maybe you're just like, you're doing too much, but you just keep on going. So then you get a flu, and the flu is a little harder than a cold, right? Like a flu generally will put you on your back. But if you're the kind of person that doesn't listen and keeps going, and you're not slowing down and you just keep going, then I think that's when the flu becomes the heart attack. So the message is, it starts off as a cold, then a flu, then a heart attack or a stroke. The messages get louder and louder and louder, but make no mistake, the messages are always getting through, right? The just like I say with your body, you know, it's, I don't think it's that we get a stroke. It's like the body goes on strike, right? Like it's not a stroke, it's a strike. You know, think of a job, right? If people in the job are not communicating, if the staff and the bosses are not communicating, the company goes out on strike, right? Well, if you're not listening to your body goes out on stroke. Your body goes on strike, right? Your body goes on. So it's like we don't need to wait till the body shuts down. It's like to be able to listen to a deeper truth that's inside of us, to be able to let go of all the conditioning and programming and what we think we should be doing, and to just listen to the authentic, intuitive wisdom that's inside of us, you know. And I think probably now more than ever, there's a big call for that, because, you know, there's so much disinformation and misinformation. You wouldn't know what you'd be listening to in the world. In fact, like whatever TV station or radio or different person you listen to, everybody has a different perspective. Everybody is telling you something different. It's really hard to, you know, even know what to believe. I would just say, don't believe any of it. Believe nothing, right? The only thing that you know that's real is this present moment. Everything else is made up. Everything else is an idea. Everything else is imagined, right? So the only thing that's real is this present moment right now. It's the most authentic thing that there is. And in this present moment, if your body is saying, look, you need to rest, and that's what you need to do. If this present moment, your body is saying, hey, you need to do some healing here, then that's what you need to do. And if you avoid it, it's going to come back again louder and louder. But sometimes that intuitive voice, that inner wisdom, not to be confused with conditioning and programming. So as an example, conditioning program, maybe someone leaves school and they go to college and they're learning something because that's what their parents want them to learn. You know, maybe they go into engineering, maybe they go into nursing, maybe they go into accountancy, right? All the accountants and the engineers are usually doing it because their parents are like, you've got a choice, doctor, accountant, or engineer, right? So people go into those professions, not necessarily because they love them, but because it seems like a good choice, right? Like at least start there and then decide what you want to do. And so people sometimes they go in and then they pivot because they realize that's not what they want to do, right? And so the suggestion I have is like, the reason people get sick is because they keep doing what they don't want to do and then trying to pivot to what they do want to do, rather than listening to their inner wisdom, rather than listening to the inner voice, rather than being in alignment with their authentic own truth, you know. And like I said, if we listen to what's going on in the world, the world is freaking crazy. Everybody, everything will tell you something different. But it's like, as we clear everything out of the way, the simplest thing that I've learned after 30 years of doing healing, the simplest thing that I've learned is when everything is stripped away, the only thing that's left is love. Love alone remains. Boom. Boom. And that's really, my friends, that's what healing is. It's just returning to love, returning to true, returning to alignment, you know. And I think the world is going through a massive healing, right? The world has been going through a massive healing. I think there's a lot of purging in the world. I think that there's a lot of corruption. I think there's a lot of abuse in and profiteering of illness and sickness and um and kind of corporate greed. I think there's a lot of misalignment in the world, and I think that the only place that can go is down. It's like as the energy of consciousness opens and raises and people return to truth, it's it's going to be harder and harder for people to push falsehoods onto you. Like, it's the more you're in alignment, the easier it is for you to see through the bullshit. The easier it is for you to see when someone says something to you that's not true. You don't need to ask yourself if it's true or not. It's like your bullshit meter is like a barometer. And when someone says something to you that's not true, you know, it's like when you're in alignment, it's just like it has no impact on you. It has no push on you, you know, and that's, but when we were young, we were so influenced by everything because we're so vulnerable to impressions, and we took on board things like not being good enough, you know. And now this next stage of our collective healing is returning to the knowledge and the wisdom and the understanding that we are enough. And not only are we enough, we're so much more than enough. We're so much more powerful than we've been led to believe. That not only are we physical bodies with spirits inside us, but we're full fractal light beings. We're not these like fragments, but we're full fractal beings. We're part of the collective. We're part of the whole universe expressing itself through a moment in time. And so as we awaken to that restoration, that memory of who we are, not only are we enough, not only, like, that's the least of it. That's the least of who we are and what we are. We're enough. Not only are we enough, you know, but we're pure love. We're pure love without judgment and criticism and blame and guilt and shame and all of that conditioning and programming and corruption that's in the world. It's all collapsing. It's all falling down as we as individuals reclaim the parts of ourselves and free and liberate ourselves from our shadow and our wounding. The reflection of that is taking place in the world. And so as individuals, as we return back to our light, so too does our world. This is the story of the caterpillar to the butterfly. You've heard it many times, but the concept is that the caterpillar is consuming itself. It literally consumes, it's consuming 600 times its original body weight. Like, it consumes and consumes, a little bit like humans, consuming, right? And then the caterpillar goes into the cocoon, and the caterpillar turns into goop, right? Now, maybe the past 3 years, life has been a little bit like goop. Everything stopped, everything slowed down. We went into this big like cocoon, and the old version of you is literally dying away. The old version of who you are, the conditioning, the programming, the wounding, the perceptions, the guilt, the shame, the mistakes, that old version of you is literally dying away. And the new version of you, literally the caterpillar to the butterfly, basically what happens, there's these luminary cells, and the luminary cells, they find each other and they come together and they start to form the butterfly, right? So in the same way as a collective, in the collective society, people start to resonate with other people. They start to find their tribe. They start to find their family connections, and they start to move away from people they don't resonate with anymore. And they start to vibrate and resonate with people that meet them at the level of truth, that meet them at their highest frequency. In the same way that the butterfly comes together through the luminary cells, finding each other, coming together, forming the butterfly, and nothing of the caterpillar is left when the butterfly emerges. The old version of itself has completely died off. And in a way, us as humans, we're at this pivotal point in time where we're going through this huge transformation, where we are letting go of what we believe about ourselves. We're letting go of what we thought that we were, the falsehoods, the conditioning, the programming, the not being good enough, all the crap that we have about ourselves, the ideas that you can't heal yourself, the ideas that you can't heal others, the ideas that you're not creative, that you're not musical, all the crap and all the conditioning and all the programming that we have about ourselves is being stripped away, and our ego is dissolving. The ego is the identity that you have based on your wounds. And we're returning back into right relationship with the self. And as each of us come back into right relationship with the self, the world, this earth in which we live in, is a reflection of our consciousness. So the reason why corporations are so corrupt is because the shadow side of people is corrupt. And when we come into alignment with who we are and what we are, then that corruption collapses. That corruption is exposed. It can no longer be. When we return back to our full fractal light energy, then that corruption can no longer be in the face of truth. Anyway, that's a big mouthful I went in today. Water, beautiful. Not to be confused with the piece of paper, but the real thing, right? And that's, you are the real thing. You're not an idea. You're not a concept. You're not a belief. You're not even the beliefs that you have about yourself. You can give that one up, right? But we're something else. We're something so much more than the idea and the concepts and the thoughts that we have about ourselves. And I hope that you can take something away from tonight, something that may have just like spoken, or to expose, just simply to expose that truth of who and what we are, to bring it into the light, to question things, to talk about things. Like I said, I don't know if you can speak truth, because the moment we speak, it's distorted by perceptions. But what we can do is we can eliminate what truth is not. We can eliminate what is not. And I think that everything that's not love can be stripped away. And that all the work we're doing is really the stripping away of anything that's not love. And all our aches and pains and suffering, all our conditioning and programming, all the corporate greed, all the things that are not love, we're just stripping them away, and we're coming back to this one fundamental truth, that the essence of who you are is beyond what you can write down on a piece of paper. And it can't be removed because someone tells you you're not good enough. It can't be removed. The essence of who you are cannot be removed by anyone. You never cease to be the fundamental truth of who you are. And so that's really what I see, is like we're returning back to that fullness of who we are. And if you're interested in jumping on board with more of that and doing some work on that, I offer sessions, I offer training. It's my pleasure and my honor to be of service and to help people to do the work on themselves, right? Like it's the, how would you say it is? It's like the earning it, right? Like you want to, as we come into alignment, it affects everyone in our lives. It affects the people around us, the people we work with, the people we love. And I think I always think, right, the greatest gift that you can give is really your own self-growth. Because when you value yourself more and grow yourself more, I think it's the best investment that you can make in yourself, is to invest in yourself. Because look, things will always come and go, whether it's relationships, whether it's finances, whether it's jobs, economy, who knows? Things are always going to come and go. But the one thing that you're always going to be left with is you. You're there, right? And so that's why I think, like, as we return back to our center, like, you know, that's really what has to come into alignment, because the world is a reflection of that, as I said. So yeah, thank you for tuning in. I hope that you can take something away. I'll post here on the side. That's my level 1 workshop coming up. It's on in October 14th and 15th. It's on in Vancouver at the Stretch Space in Kitsilano. If you're interested, you can either just register there at that link or reach out to me if you have any questions. It's a 2-day workshop. You're learning bioenergy. You're learning the principles and the concepts of bioenergy. And it's a fabulous weekend, such a good weekend. And, you know, I think if you get it like a little taste of bioenergy here, it's like, you know, we're not even touching the tip of the iceberg. It's really like, really just coming back to the true essence of who we are. And I think that healing is a beautiful way to discover who you are and find who you are. Because there's nothing more magical than, like, when you're learning healing, you're not just learning it for you, even though it is for you, but you're really learning it for other people. I think it's like, you know, it's a service, right? Like, you're learning healing to do it for other people, like that, you know, to be able to take someone else's pain away, to be able to take someone else's suffering away, right? And so this learning healing to do on other people is really a beautiful act of service, a beautiful blessing, a beautiful gift, and yeah, a beautiful opportunity to give, right? And I sometimes think that the more, you know, sometimes people are trying to receive for themselves, but I always think, you know, the more you give, the more you receive, rather than trying to receive, right? Like, just give, right? The more you do for others, the better your life becomes. It's really, I don't know, that's what I've learned over 30 years is, you know, if you want to receive more love, give more love away. You know, if you want to receive more healing, give more healing away. You know, do for other people what it is that you want to do, what you want to receive for yourself. You know. Thank you for tuning in. I'm going to stop this recording. If you're on YouTube, please leave a like and subscribe, leave a comment. Check out our level 1 workshop, or check out the sessions. We've also a group healing coming up during the month. And thank you for tuning in.